Just to get a sense of who's here, how many of so first thing I've managed to do is to purge all of my students. So none of them are here, and the reason they're not here isn't necessarily that they don't think I'm worth hearing, although some of them think that, but it's because they've heard this before. Well, then oh yes, Max, we've had some recent correspondence. So if you were to say, well, I don't want to hear it twice, or you can skip it when we do it in class, you can skip it then. How many of you are, in fact, in the process of writing a business plan for some venture? Oh, kind of half. And how many of you are here because you were thinking that you might write one someday? Okay, and who is other? Yes, sir. What? And can you tell?
I'm an attorney. I help clients write. I could know what to tell.
Okay, good. And so you're sensitive to the fact that they might be able to sue me if I misinform them about this, right? Good. Try and catch me. How many of you are fairly far along in these business? Those that are writing plans, how many of you are sort of at the end and you're just trying to check whether you've got it about right? Okay, a couple. Good. I think that in what I talk about today, there will be a little something for all of you, not for the attorney. No, you can stay. It's okay. The advantage is that this is probably one of the quieter rooms, so if you want to sort of nod off, it's okay. In fact, if you want to move to the back, it's fine. My first job out of school was at Procter & Gamble. I grew up as a chemical engineer, and so this was back in the 60s, and I went to work for Procter & Gamble, and people have their own sort of daily cycles of energy, and mine was always really low and still is low in the afternoon, so if I'm not up here standing up, I'd probably be prone. But anyhow, you're going to keep me awake. So after lunch, we were in laboratories, and the way the labs were set up, the lab space was right in when you came in the door, and then at the far end of the room were the desks, and the desks were facing against the wall away from the door. So I perfected the art of falling asleep in my chair with my back to the door with a book in my lap, my feet up on the desk. And I tuned my hearing so that if the door opened, I could sort of real quickly flip a page or something. Are you coming in here? Oh, okay. Well, I'm getting ready to start.
A lot of people trickling in,
Oh,
so I'll let them
all right, good.
find their way in.
Well, I can just get going. I just was going to... Good. Thanks a lot, Kate. So as the first slide tells you, we're going to be talking about business planning, and I'm John Castle. I teach entrepreneurship. I've taught entrepreneurship at UW for, this is now my 11th year. In the last 3-4 years, I've also been teaching it at Seattle U and at the Bainbridge Graduate Institute. One of the interesting things about that, though, well, Bainbridge, I don't know, how many of you know BGI? They're devoted to sustainable business, and so it's a different view of the world than most people just starting a business. And so I've learned, different aspects of the business planning process there. And so the other thing that at Seattle U this last year, they had a group of fine arts students, and they decided, having nothing to do with me, that they wanted to add a business class to their fine arts curriculum. And so they selected my business planning course so that they actually set up a separate section for me to talk to the fine arts students, all doing, wanting to open a dinner theater or all kinds of fine arts stuff that they did. And it was interesting. And I've always preached to people that the business planning process is pretty much the same, whether it's a for-profit, non-profit, the things that you measure as the the quote profit, the outcome that you're after might be described differently, but the process was the same. And that's been reinforced to me in teaching at the different schools, and particularly with the fine arts students and the sustainable business students. At any rate, so the other thing I'm going to tell you is these slides are available at that. The course I teach at UW is called Creating a Company, and it has a rather extensive website describing what they do there. I won't talk about it right now, but at any rate, I'll put that URL up on the last slide. That'll sit up there for a while, so you don't have to write it down right now. You'd think we'd have a simpler thing to do there, but we don't. Anyhow, so the first slide I have, there's a picture of me back in the 1970s when I lived in Maine. I was in the seaweed business in Maine then. Oh, the other thing I didn't tell you is that I've been starting and running small companies for about 45 years now. So, you know, the things that I talk about draw a lot from the things that I have done. I have an extensive collection of books whose title is Entrepreneurship. There's 2 or 3 of them that appear from the publishers every year that they send to me. Desk copy, I've never read any of them. But they all say pretty much the same thing, and maybe I've managed to summarize some of it. At any rate, I like to have this photograph up there at the beginning because I see an analogy here that the business planning process I see is one of trying to reduce the risk in whatever you're doing. You're trying to collect the information that's going to make it more probable that you can be successful, and hence make your enterprise less risky. And the point of view that I take is that let's assume that you're doing this to present it to investors, keeping in mind that even if you're having it's a small lifestyle business you want to start, the investor might not be and probably won't be a venture capitalist, but instead would be yourself. Might be the bank, but it's going to be yourself. And Dimitri, you've heard this before, so okay, if you like it, you can stay. Another one of my former students. And so anyhow, the analogy is that ice climbing, which looks like a very dangerous sport, is in fact one of where basically what you're trying to do is manage your risks. It's going to be dangerous, but you know what you're going to do from a financial point of view is going to be dangerous. It's just that you're not likely to die if you fail, although people have. So one of my favorite people is Yogi Berra, who has all kinds of wonderful quotes. Let's see, what fraction? How many of you have ever heard of Yogi Berra? Oh, well, that's good. He's got more name recognition. As audiences get younger and younger, I worry that they won't remember who he was. But he had a lot of really quotable things. And this one really, I think, applies to the business planning process and the things that I'm going to tell you about it as well. I sort of subtitle this particular discussion as how to write a business plan that somebody else wants to read. You can buy books on business plans. They're all pretty good. There's a nice format for things. But the worst business plans I see, the ones I hate to get, are the ones that come along and have 1.0 mission, 1 point, and they sort of take you down through the outline of a business plan, which is a very useful thing to have. But the fact of the matter is that I don't think that represents a readable business plan. It's a nice way to organize your facts, but at some point you want to present this to somebody else, and you want them to read it, and you would like them to enjoy reading it. And so I think of a business plan as being a short story about customers. And I'll talk a little bit more about various elements of that. But keep that in mind, that you're trying to tell a story about some people who you think are going to behave in a certain way. And you're trying, as you put your story together, to convince the reader that you actually know these people that you're writing about, that you understand the customers, because one of the things you're going to be trying to do when you introduce your product to them is to change their behavior so that they're going to buy whatever it is you're selling. and stop doing whatever it is they're doing instead. So here's a summary of a business plan. By the way, you're going to note on these slides, after I've gotten through a few of them, that there are no statements on them. They're all questions. And they represent, I think, the important questions that you need to know the answers to. Now, not every plan has to know the answer to all of them, because it'll vary with the type of business you're in, and it'll vary with whoever it is you're going to present the plan to. But in general, you're going to get a sort of a checklist of questions to answer. So I think these would be rather obvious questions. You'd say, well, sure, my plan's going to have these things. What do you do? Who wants it and why? Who are you? You know, your keynote speaker this morning talked about team. You know, that's who are you? And ultimately, what's in it for me? And now these are questions, by the way, that the investors are going to ask. It's not going to be, it's not about you, but it's about what the reader's interested in also. Remember, this is a short story about customers written that way because you want somebody to enjoy reading it. Now, there's something about this slide that I want to point out to you. It's got a really glaring mistake. However, you don't realize it's a mistake yet. So I'm going to tell you why. And in order to do that, I have to introduce you to something that's called Castle's Rule 16b. You remember it, right? You don't? He doesn't remember. Good. Castle's Rule. You got to go to class again. Castle's Rule 16b states that any time you are presented with or you present a list of things to anybody in a plan, in a presentation, whatever it might be, whatever's on the top of the list is what you think is most important. And whatever's on the top of the list is what the reader will assume is most important. And so there's a mistake on this slide. Who can tell me what that mistake is? It violates Castle's Rule 16b. Yes, sir?
So what's in it for me should be up very top.
What's in it for me? Okay. Anybody have another opinion?
Who are you?
Who are you at the top? Well, now, let me start again. What's my definition of a business plan? Short story about? So, who wants it and why has got to be the most important thing. If you don't have the customers right, you won't design the right product, your team won't make any difference, and there won't be anything in it for anybody. So the customers have to be on the top, and that would then... The others, kind of I don't have a particular preference for the others. They're sort of different styles of investors, and you've heard a few speakers today talking about that. But the customers have to be on the top. That's where it starts. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the common mistakes of entrepreneurs that I find is they get themselves focused on that which they do well. And if you think of it, it's kind of the antithesis of thinking about what the customer needs. And so I like this is a local mountain out in the North Bend area, Mount Tenerife. Not a lot of people get up there. The trail is awful. It's right adjacent to Mount Si, which is probably the most popular mountain in the area. But nobody goes to Tenerife. At any rate, up at the top, it's quite rugged and quite beautiful. And when you get up to the top, there's no trail at all. You got to kind of find your way. So while when I get up there, I know that I have the skills to get to the top, but I'm not exactly sure which way to go to get there. And this is sort of the problem the business planner faces too. You know what you're very good at. Now you got to use those skills. So let's talk about some of the elements of the plan itself that are important. And the first, of course, has to do with whether or not you're going to the area of opportunity. This is sometimes called an industry analysis in the outlines, 2.0, section 2.1 industry analysis. At any rate, it's useful to define the industry that you're going into and to understand what it is. And In particular, the reason that you want to go into it is because there's something missing. You sense that, there's a lot of activity already. Industries are sort of full of players and producing all kinds of products surrounding what they do. I mean, look at is there a mobile phone industry? Is that an industry, or is that, sort of part of the communications industry? You have some choices as to how to define it. At sort of another time, or, maybe if you have some questions, we can talk about why does it matter what industry you call it. Well, the fact of the matter is you actually have the opportunity to choose your industry by the way you describe it. Because you can define the industry as communications or as phones or as apps or, any one of those could be called an industry. If you're only going to play in a portion of it, there's no benefit to you to describe it as something that's much, much bigger and irrelevant. So if all you're making is a mobile phone app to calculate golf scores, it doesn't help you to put in your plan that you are in the communications industry because it happens to be delivered on a phone. And so you want to be thoughtful about that, and you can be pretty sure that, I wonder if I can close this. I thought ice climbing is dangerous, just closing that door is. So at any rate, so you want to be thoughtful about defining your industry, and there's some utility in that because once you've defined it, you can then, it means that you understand who the customers are within that particular industry segment. So we're talking about segmentation of a market. Then you can answer the questions about that follow about that. So the definition of the industry is important. And I would say maybe I've screwed up Castle's Rule 16b again, and that maybe why does anyone want it, and be talking about the customers might be important. But in this sense, at some point you have to, and it is useful, to describe the playing field that you're in. So it's I think it's necessary that you do that, and I think you'll find that it's helpful. The other thing about industries is that they are not static. There are laws that are changing. There's macro environments that are changing. There are, recessions and so on that are going on. There's competitors. There's all kinds of things going on within an industry. And so it's really it's important to you to know what the important things are that are happening there. And in particular, you need to understand what's changing, how fast it's changing. You're going to form a company. Right now you're writing a business plan. You get the business plan written and it's going to take you 2 or 3 months. And then you're going to go out and try to raise money, and that's going to take you 6 months. And then you're going to get the money, and then you actually have to start hiring the team because you couldn't commit to people before you could pay them, and so on. And so by the time you actually are going to go to market, it's going to be 18 months from now. Well, that's the target you've got to hit. So where the industry is right now is interesting, but is less important than the directions and the speed that it's going to get there. And so the result is that, and because things are changing, the opportunity that you see now may not be there. So there's this window of opportunity that you're trying to hit. And so you have to be mindful. And it's kind of got bounds in time. It's going to start a year from now, and it's going to only last for 2 years, and then it's going to be gone. There's lots of those things that sort of pop up all the time now. Everything having to do with social network and the Groupon phenomenon and so on. Well, I saw a business plan 4 days ago that somebody wants to start up a new couponing business. Well, it's hot, it's big, it's late, it's gone. And it isn't that it isn't going to be there. The problem is that there's already so many people in it that, if you're successful and you get your share, you will have 0.1% of that market, and it's going to be very hard to get that much. So you got to change your view of it. So the window of opportunity has to be understood. Now finally we get to the top of the list. Who wants your solution? Now, this is where it's useful. I don't know if how many of you went to Dave Parker's workshop this morning. I was on ideation. And one of the things that he was talking about, in fact, was actually it was Andy who was talking about naming your customer. I find that it's really useful as you try to, first of all, you have to know who your customer is. You got to decide. You have lots and lots of choices. I don't care what business you're going into, you've got more than one customer. If you only have, one very well-defined group, you've got an advantage in a way, but it means it limits your size. You get to choose, by the way, who you think your customers are, because you're going to build your business to appeal to whoever you think it is important. You've got to define them. It's really useful to think of them as a person, describe them, describe their lifestyle, describe how they make decisions, describe how much money they've got. Get to know them really well. There's an article, in fact, I think it's actually on the website, about Tommy Bahama, which is a very successful brand. It's been around for a long time now. But there were 3 founders of the Tommy Bahama, and they would get together all the time and sit down and talk about what does Tommy like. Would Tommy like this style with these colors and so on? So they had a very clear understanding of Tommy Bahama and what it was that Tommy liked and didn't like, and were able to build a very successful business around catering to Tommy. Tommy didn't exist. They made him up. And so you can make up your customer too in that way. It's going to be a composite of the things that you know, and you're only going to know those things, by the way, if you actually get out and talk to them. This is another thing that I certainly emphasize to all of my classes, is that internet research doesn't teach you anything useful. It's probably okay, by the way, for an industry definition or some parts of it. But when you get down to the customers, there is no substitute for going out into the world of the customers and actually spending some time with them. They will do more for you in defining what your product needs to be, do, have, than anything that you've imagined yourself. It's very, very rare that a successful business is built without a close understanding of the customers. Steve Jobs to the contrary. There's exceptions to a lot of stuff, but almost every business needs to start knowing their customers. So ultimately, what's important when you're putting your business together, and hence your plan, you have to get used to the fact that your vision of things, while it seems very important and interesting to you, is actually of little importance to the business. You need to find out what the customer's vision is, and then build your business, your products, your services around satisfying them, making them feel that they've achieved what they want by buying your product. It's not about you, it's about the customers. Excuse me a second. Here's some more questions about customers. So you can find you think you can find out who they are. In order to find out what they need, who's the expert on what a customer needs? It's them. It's not you. You would like to become expert on interpreting what they tell you, but they will tell you what they need. If you ask them the questions in the right way, then they're going to explain to you what you want. If I suggest as you move forward in your business, ally yourself with somebody that really understands how to ask those questions, how to do good market research, and then sort of create your business and your brand around that. Yes, Chris.
So we got some advice this morning, which is a little contrary to that.
Who?
I think in the first keynote, it was something along the lines of, if you just ask your customers what you want, and then you spend 18 months producing it, and then give it to them, they're going to tell you, well, that's not what I want anymore, or they don't really know what they want. In other words...
Yeah, no, I heard him say it.
Right.
And I said that there are exceptions. But, look, if you want, you can do it that way. This is, remember I told you, that I didn't say I'm giving you an absolute formula for success. I said I'm giving you some techniques to reduce the risk of the business. Basically what he was saying is that industry moves so fast that what people tell you they want now isn't what they're going to want in the future. However, if you track what they wanted yesterday and today and this afternoon and so on, maybe you can come closer to guessing what they wanted. How many games did PopCap develop? I don't know. Long list of them. Yeah, we got a bunch of them. How many were really successful?
2 or 3.
One. Bejeweled. And maybe some others coming along after that. Yeah.
I always hear this debate, and I think there's a difference. I think it's good to know what the customer wants and need, but I think also what's important is whatever industry you are in, you have to apply your creativity and your thinking and your innovation to deliver. And I think this is what happened. I mean, even with Steve Jobs, when he started Next, he went to universities and did research and talked to people. And I think this is a real difference, is you can redefine what they need, but you've got to start with what they need in the first place to.
I think that's well stated. You need to know what they're thinking. They may not be able to define the product that is going to satisfy it, but they can tell you what's missing in their life. That's for sure. And and there isn't anybody who knows any more about it than they do. Yes, man.
What's the best way to get a significant sample size for your market research? Are there any websites that you recommend that do that at a reasonable cost?
I don't know. The answer is I don't think so. For any specific field, for any specific market, there will be people that know it really well that will sell you their knowledge.
I mean, kind of customer surveying or something of some sort.
Oh, you mean how to do customer surveys?
Well,
that's an art form.
Yeah.
There's an element of science and behavioral science and asking questions and so on that you can read about and learn, or that you can find people whose business is market research and get their advice. I'm not really one of them.
I guess the thing is that it seems like a catch-22, in that you need to have customers to be able to ask them what they need in order to make something.
No, you don't have to have customers. You have to have people who you believe are going to be your customers. Okay, remember, you start off with a picture in your mind of what a customer is. Maybe you're right and maybe you're wrong. Well, so if you decide it's going to be, 48 to 50-year-old women who drive Audis, and they're going to want your new dashboard design. Well, that's a theory. Okay, so you have, in one sense, you think I'm really smart, I know the answer. You go build the dashboard and you open up a store, a glassy baby store for dashboards, and you stick them out there and you see if anybody comes in and buys them. The other thing you can do is go talk to 49-year-old women who are driving these cars and ask them whether they care. And they'll tell you, if they say, no, I'm not interested in the dashboard, but if you give me, soft seats, give me a bicycle seat or something like that instead of this car seat that hurts my back. But, they'll give you an answer. And you don't have to take their word for it. If you believe you have other information, you can use it. But you ignore the customer at your peril. That's what I can tell you. It's about reducing the risk of what you're going to do. Yes, sir.
If I may add, this was always a big problem when I started my business, is to really look at the market research and analysis and everything. But then the reality is, most of startup, you're starting small. And you pretty much know how much you can produce, whether it's software or anything. And I think to that extent, just doing a very simple survey for your family and friends sometimes actually is what you need. And it saves you a lot of time and a lot of money to get that much, just, asking people that, this helped us out a lot.
Well, you're right, and he's right, and I'm right. I told you this is about basically managing the risk in the business that you're going to start. You're about to invest a lot of your time, could be a couple of years of your life, and you're about to invest maybe your life savings in the business you're going to start. It's up to you to decide when you have enough information. You're the first investor. If you think asking, two uncles and who are smart guys is enough and you're ready to spend your money, spend it. It's not my problem. But I think that in general, the more people you talk to, the more likely you are to pick the right answer to serve them. And of course, as you can see clearly, there's a point of diminishing returns. At some point, you've got enough information, you're going to either get on with it or do something else. There's no cutoff point. And you're the one that has to be satisfied. Now, if you're writing a business plan and you're going to present it to investors, you better have talked to enough people to satisfy them. By the way, this last item on here, what are these customers' other options? The things that customers think of as other options are absolutely everything else that they might do with their money other than buy your product. So it may be that they don't, if they don't even want a dashboard, they want a car without a dashboard, all right? So they don't care about dashboards at all. They're going to spend their money on going to the theater. Well, that represents a competition of sorts. Doing nothing is that's one of the most frustrating of the competitors that small companies face. That the customer's just indifferent. So you need to think about competition as broadly as you can. Now, at some point, you're entrepreneurs, you're smart, you're creative, you've been thinking about whatever it is you're going to build or sell for a long time. You've dreamed about it for several years. You know exactly what it is, and you know exactly what it's going to do. However, unless that matches what the customer says they want, you've absolutely wasted your time. One of the things in my classes, I have, my students are writing business plans. And they're itching to describe their product to me. And I ask them to sort of describe what the product's going to do and who they're going to do it for. And I won't even ask them, and I won't even let them talk about what the product looks like and is going to do until they have satisfied me that they understand who the customer is. And so my advice to you is to follow my advice in that regard. Don't fall in love with your own idea of the product. Ask the customer. They will describe it. They will define it for you. They will design it for you if you let them. And they're going to design something that's attractive to them. The question of whether or not you can protect your product, so this goes into the area of patent law and so on. If you can get a patent, it can be useful. It's not a guarantee of anything. It makes investors feel comfortable if they believe that nobody else can make and can simply copy you. But that's an area that, with a few exceptions, is a really slippery slope. You could probably talk at length about that. Patents are a nice thing to say you have. For most small businesses, it's not the thing that you can count on to get you successful. Remember, you got to survive for 3 or 4 years, and your patent won't even issue for that much time in a lot of cases. So if you got them, claim them, but don't make your business. Don't try not to have a business that's absolutely dependent on the patent, unless you've already got it and it's proven itself. Now, this is because the investors are not going to be convinced, not because it's not a good idea. Yes?
I had a question about not falling in love with your idea of the product. What happens in the case when the founder thinks that they're the customer and that's why they're building the product?
If they're spending their own money to build it, they can think whatever they want. But if they're going to try to raise money from somebody else, they've got to get beyond that. Unless you're one of these superstar repeat guys that's successful no matter what they do. I'm assuming that most of the people in this room are mortals, and don't fall in that category. I mean, it's a very good question, but and it happens all the time. And the most frustrating people for me to work with are founders absolutely in love with what they do, when all the evidence about the market is to the contrary. I usually don't get beyond one conversation with them. Not because I'm unwilling, because they just don't, if I don't tell them what they want to hear, they go away. And just try not to get yourself in that mindset, sort of be open-minded. So here's a very successful invention. This is a set of speakers that can be used out, or microphones rather, that can be used in the woods to channel, but they're green, they fit in with the environment. He liked this product. Problem was that we couldn't manufacture a second set. So you got some customers, you understand your market and your industry. You now know what your product is going to do. And now you have to start thinking about whether or not what you've invented or what you're going to build is actually going to be more valuable to the customer. It may be solving a problem that the customer says they want, but they may have already some alternatives. So you need to think about, and this is going to go to the pricing question. I mean, the Glassy Baby story at lunch about pricing was an interesting one. There's sort of no metrics for that. By the way, what I particularly liked about what they have done, and those of you get into the subject of branding and neurobranding and things like that, is they ultimately understood that they weren't selling glass. They were selling a set of emotions that people felt when this glass was around them. In fact, they might have been able to do that with any number of products that sort of tapped into the emotion. And, they picked the glass has a lot of properties that make it a good choice for that. So the value to the customer may have nothing to do with the physical cost of the product. In fact, the most successful products are the ones that get beyond that and sell the emotions. There's a friend of mine, all the big consumer marketing companies are very, very good at this. A friend of mine, Chuck Pettis, you can look him up at brand.com. He's been doing branding work for years. And he has, when he's come into my classes to talk, has a number of examples that are like that. Why is it, for example, that when you see ads for laundry detergent, so Procter & Gamble was my first employee, so I think about them a little bit, and you always see, the dirty socks and the clean socks, and then there are always kids' socks. What is it that's going on there beyond, anybody can claim that my stuff gets stuff whiter. And it turns out that one of the emotions behind ads of that type are the thing that terrifies women is that other women are going to see their kids' dirty socks and think that they are bad mothers. So if you can get into the emotion behind stuff, you can sell all kinds of mundane products in very, very interesting ways. And it has to do, as the last line says, in whether or not you can get the customer to believe that you can deliver these benefits. And, in some ways, the more intangible the benefit, the stronger the pull can be. But you also have to, so you have to physically deliver the things well, too. This, by the way, is this fire lookout. I was up here just this last summer in South Dakota, and it's a lookout tower on the top of Harney Peak in the Black Hills. Now, the thing about this that sort of made me throw this slide up here, this was built back in the 30s when they had something called the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, that was basically it's like Obama's jobs bill on steroids, where the government simply put people to work, and they had them build a lot of stuff. Many of the national parks are basically, exist on the infrastructure that was built back then by guys with picks and shovels. Sort of a built-to-last model. This stuff is, this thing is still rock solid today. So, how you build it and how long it lasts and so on are important things to think about. Okay, so now the other thing you got to think about is who are these other people out there that are going to try to prevent you from being successful? The obvious ones are the other companies that are out there, doing something like that. And in fact, and the ones that you're going to say, well, my product is just like theirs, but we're better, we're faster, we're cheaper, or something like that. But I already mentioned that customers have lots of other choices. So you have to understand why the customer is buying it. I have a whole other lecture on the difference between features and benefits that you're not going to hear this afternoon. But in effect, what I'm trying to get across in that set of anecdotes is that customers don't care about the features. You, the inventor, think the features are wonderful, the things you put in there. The only thing the customer cares about is what they get from it. It's a theme that we've hit a couple of times already. So the question is, are you delivering the benefits they want, and how else can they get those benefits? Another thing that almost every business anybody goes into these days has already got a lot of other people doing stuff that's like it. And, it's just that things happen so fast. Unless you're really way out in front of the pack, you've got some competitors. It's really helpful to understand how that, what are the market shares there? Who are the real market leaders? And the market leaders, by definitions, are the ones that have, more sales than anybody else. There's a reason why they got there. So if you're going to try to emulate some other businesses or learn lessons from other businesses that are your competitors, certainly look at the guys who are first. They got first because they know more about customers than the guy who's second. I'll bet in almost every case. And by the way, a very fruitful area of market research, and small companies can get away with this. Students can get away with this in spades. So claim you're a student. You can call up the companies and just tell them that you're researching an area about their product, their business. And very often you can get the marketing people at companies who love to talk about stuff. To talk to you about, we've built it, we made it green because these people like it this way and so on. There's a lot of ways to get that information. But you'll find that the leaders tend to be fairly, a little bit arrogant and justifiably proud of what they've accomplished. So a lot of what they have done or the reasons why they've done it is going to be apparent. They'll tell you, or it'll be on their website or other things. And then, when you've got that information, you can begin to get a sense of where you fit into this picture.
On that last one, what did it, one of the lines was, how is the pie divided? What pie are you talking about?
Oh, that's the market shares.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, who owns how much of that market that you've defined as your market? Which isn't, remember, you're defining this industry, so you want to know who are the people who have got the biggest piece of it. And as I just said, not everybody is out there as your friend. These competitors are not there to help you. This is my wife in a trip we'd made to New Zealand a year or so ago. That sign, by the way, says, "No trespassing. Trespassers shot, survivors shot again." Okay, so you've got, you understand who your customers are. You've got your industry, in sort of right. You've got a product now that's going to provide what the customers say they want. And now you get to some of the sort of practical operational issues, one of which is certainly how are you going to get to them? This is in today's markets, this has always been important, but particularly in this world of sort of online social media, quote, word of mouth, unquote, this becomes a real problem. And this is where an understanding of the sort of the habits and behaviors of your customer becomes really helpful. Beyond what their product preferences are, how do they shop for stuff? How are you going to actually get to them? First of all, if you've got a whole population of millions of people, how are you going to identify them? And then having identified them, what can you do to get their attention? And how can you get the product to them? Well, shipping is easy, but shipping costs money. Can you get them to pay for the shipping? So a lot of things that have to do with sort of getting to the point where the customers make the decision. And part of it is convincing them that you can deliver it the way they want it. Anyhow, this is sort of like a whole course on marketing and distribution, but you need to be able to convince investors in your plan that you understand where the customers are and you understand how you're going to access them. If you've got something that's a good product and if it's solving a real need, the investors will sort of believe that part of it. Once you've convinced them of that, their next question is going to be, well, but how are you going to get to them? Can you afford the advertising costs to go after that group of people? Are you going to have salespeople that are going to go out and knock on doors? How many sales calls can they make in a day? So there's a lot of things that you have to understand about sort of getting to the customers. And then that leads to this sort of one of the next natural questions, which is, how are you going to forecast your sales? Now, so you're going to have a set of financial projections in your business plan. The top lines of the financial projections are sales. Did you make them up? How did you get to them? What information did you use about the customers and their behavior that made it possible for you to create that sales forecast? Just as when you were thinking about your customers, you had to sort of separate the customers from the whole population of other people. It's really useful to understand who your first customers are going to be. The term that I use I call them the alpha customers. And the alpha customers, typically, they're the ones that are most likely to like what you have done and be willing to buy it. And they're usually a pretty big fraction of your business, particularly for small companies, because they're the ones that are going to be the first ones that are going to be repeat buyers. You've got a certain loyalty in them. Typically, they're going to be 40 to 60% of your business. These sort of alpha customers. They're the customers without whom you cannot survive. They may not be sufficient for you to survive. You may have to get, the next group of 20 or 30% or something like that. But if you don't get the alpha customers right, you don't even get started. So you need to be, as you're doing your market research and getting to know the customers, figure out who these alphas are, these ones that are most likely to match what you are offering to them. The last question reminds me about the greatest enemy of a new business and an entrepreneur is time. And I think that entrepreneurs don't understand that very well. And I take my students through a sales forecasting process that tries to get them to recognize that in all of the things that you do to try to generate sales, something's going on all the time, which is that the clock is ticking. And you're paying rent, and you're paying salaries, and you're carrying your inventory if you've got it and so on. But the customers are not buying. They're buying on their time schedule and not on yours. So understanding the time lags in your business. If you're going to, let's say, send out salespeople, well, the salespeople have to have leads. So there's something that goes before that that's a lead generation process. And the lead generation process might take a week, and it might take a month, and it might take a quarter. And then the sales folks go out and they make their sales calls, and they can only get so many. So that this list doesn't get knocked off all at once. You chip a little bit off of the list at a time as the sales calls get made, and then the customers take their own time in deciding. Meanwhile, you're writing checks to keep your business alive. So you need to understand the effect of time on your business, and it's sort of it's a financial question, but it's also a behavioral question that you have to understand. How urgent is this need for the customer, so that you can find a way to get them to move quicker? Usually, they don't want to move as quick as you need them to. I think of sales forecasting as this old silver mine in Colorado reminds me of it. You can forecast sales, you think, really well for the first 3 months. Then as you get a little bit further into it, 6 months down, you got a vague idea what might be happening then, because it's going to depend on the success of what happened at the beginning. And then finally you have the stuff that's a year or 2 or 3 out that you have absolutely no idea what's going on. It's sort of way in the back of that mind. You can't see it at all. And in fact, if you don't get successful in the beginning, you're not going to bother to dig the tunnel that deep anyhow. So you say, okay, well, yeah, I kind of understand that. That's sort of obvious. Well, so here's the dilemma you've got. You're presenting this to an investor. Are you giving him a 3-month sales forecast? No, you're going to show how you're going to be this big in 3 years. Well, you haven't the slightest idea what's going to go on in that period of time. So you're making the best guess you can. And there's some processes for doing better sales forecasting that have some checks and balances in them. That I have some ways of doing that, and lots of others do too. But this is sort of where this effect of time and money sort of come together. And you just have to recognize that you're doing something that's really uncertain. And you're just going to have to live with the fact that it's uncertain, and that it's a good guess. Now, once you know that you're making a guess, what that should do is to sort of sharpen your antenna so that you're looking for things along the way, little pieces of rock sticking out there that are going to tell you that you got to move a little bit to the right or to the left. So because you recognize the uncertainty, it should tune you to look for signals that allow you to be a little sharper in the future. But it's going to be a guess. The team is important. There's a couple aspects of team. One, you want to have people, of course, as several other people today and other places I'm sure have told you, you want to have people that know what they're doing, for sure. But, you're not going to be Boeing with tens of thousands of employees, so you got a lot of employees to choose from to perhaps work with or look to help. You're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 people that are going to be really important to the early success of your company in the first year or 2 or something like that. These are, you're a startup business. So one of the things that you need to become very sensitive to is how well you work with these other people. So you can get talented people that simply you're just not going to be able to live with. And because the other thing is, and I'm sure many of you, how many of you have been in a little business with just a few people already? So you know this. This is like you're married to them. You see these people many hours a day. There's all kinds of stressful stuff that's going to happen to your company, and you've got to sort of weather this together. And the different people feel the different stresses in different ways. They all have different resources, different personal characteristics. So understanding the team members really makes a huge difference. This is where you want to be careful. Beyond the talent, it has to do with sort of your ability to work together. How do you find that out? Well, sometimes you just got to try it and do it. You have to, but certainly when you getting together with your proposed partners early on, have conversations about this subject. Try to get some understanding of how you're going to deal with situations of disagreement. Well, times you agree are easy. That's no problem. There was some guys back in Maine. This is back in the 70s, actually. These guys were starting a new medical diagnostic company. They all had worked for Corning Glass Company, and Corning did some stuff that turned into medical devices over time. And the 3 of them left Corning Glass. They hadn't actually worked too closely together there, but they knew each other. And they were going to start up this new medical diagnostics company. They had all the technical expertise. They had a marketing expert and so on. But what they decided to do was, as they were going through the business planning process, actually, and all 3 of them were married, no kids. The 3 couples rented a house in Portland, Maine, and moved into the house. They had separate bedrooms, but they all had the same kitchen and the same living room. And literally, they wanted to find out whether or not these 3 family units could coexist. spouses, significant others, and so on, are really very important. If you're in this, if you've got one and you're living in a pressure cooker all the time, your partner has to understand, your life partner has to understand the stresses that you go through and be willing to give you some measure of support, or at least not hostility. This is, it sounds, no, it doesn't sound like a small thing. It's a big thing. It's a very big thing, and it can make a huge difference. I've been fortunate to have a wife that's sort of lived through the ups and downs of my entrepreneurial career. Happily, she's kind of gotten used to it. I've learned that when things are going down, that it's her luxuries that remain longer than mine. But I think this type of understanding is, I think this is one of the most critical things to think about as you're putting a team together. No kidding. And I've had some really good experiences with that with myself too.
That seems really important, but is it something you put in your business plan?
I don't know how you'd put it. Well, in a small way. If you can point to the fact that you have worked together with these people closely, the investors will sort of pick on this. They may even ask you, have you guys worked together? What have you done together, and so on. And if you can begin to tell some personal stories, that will give them confidence that the team is going to be able to hang together through thick and thin, because there's going to be a lot of thin. Anyhow, I have stories for both of these that I'm not going to tell right now, but they both all have to do with sort of these close-knit teams and things that happen. And anybody wants to hear the stories, I can tell them later, because this is the same thought. Has the team done things together, and do they have common goals? Can they tolerate each other for long periods of time? I like this group. This is my wife and several friends of hers that have gone hiking together for years. So this picture's it's a couple of years old, actually. The copyright's newer, but the pictures are maybe 2-3 years old. And so this group of women ranged at the time in age from 48 to 82. And they'd all they knew each other for a variety of things. They might be in the same book club and other stuff together. But they all were outdoors people and liked to hike. So this is them up on Silver Peak, which is up in the Snoqualmie Pass area. It's along the access to it is along the Pacific Crest Trail. That's the peak, by the way, in the background. So they're up on a ridge approaching the peak after they've hiked about 3 miles and 2,000 feet to get there. Now, when they hike, they are never quiet. They are always talking. There's always conversations. Groups of women can do this. The woman standing in the background, her husband and I have hiked together for years and years, and many, many times. And we think we've had a full day of communication, and we probably exchanged 6 words the whole day. But that's not true with the women. When my wife hikes with this group of women, she wants to be in the middle of the pack so she can hear the conversations on the front and the back. But what's important about them is that if you were to ask any one of them whether or not they could hike up to the Silver Peak, every one of you tell you, no, I can't get there. It's too hard. It's too far. They'd think of a lot of reasons not to do it. As soon as you get them together, they make it. So really good teams are much more than the sum of the parts. They strengthen each other. Okay, so somebody thought that this question of what's in it for me was most important. It is important. It's going to be important to the investors, for sure. How are you going to spend the money is important. How ultimately, of course, how much it's going to be, how big is the pot going to be, how am I going to get my money out of it is an investor question. Usually the entrepreneurs think less about that. And, in the end, an investor is going to say, okay, so, what do you want from me? Do you want just my money? Do you want my connections? This, by the way, it's a whole separate subject of choosing investors. You'd like to get investors that are going to give you more than money. Money is relatively easy to get. Really good advice is sometimes very difficult to get. Anyhow, you do it all right, and this is what life is like. You know, it's getting a business put together successfully, getting it financed, having a few of your predictions come true. Doesn't take too many of them, actually, to make you feel awfully good. And all the failures that you've gone through along the way, so you can sort of set them aside for a while. Until you decide that, you know, you're going to go do it again. So many of you who are in this room probably already have that disease. The curse of the serial entrepreneur. You know, from my career, it's been a huge amount of fun. I've had a few moments that are just like that. And I think that, you know, the business planning process is simply a way to improve the odds that you're going to get there. That website where the slides are is on the bottom again, and I'll leave that one there. So are there, you know, I've been pretty good about questions along the way. What have I missed? What other questions come to mind? Yes, ma'am.
You brought up market research.
Yep.
At what point do you invest in somebody that does market research versus, you're obviously going to do some on your own, but at what point do you say, I need to further this and get somebody that really knows what they're doing?
You know, sometimes you can be quite expert in your own business. You know, Lee Rhodes and Glassy Baby, you know, she sort of created a business out of nothing. Nobody knows any more about that than she does. And so she never needed to go, or didn't need to go to somebody outside. So I think that it's it's an individual situation. I recommend that you try it yourself. And if you reach a point where you're not making any progress and you're not satisfied that the risk has been reduced enough, then go get some professional help. Market research help. Yeah, maybe psychological help. Yes, sir.
So, I have a question, I guess, about kind of like prototypes. I mean, what the product looks like. I mean, you might not have it in place for mass production until you actually get investments.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but if you want to have at least something to show the investors and know that's doable, know that's makeable, have to figure out how much it costs you. Where does that fit into this? I mean, how far along do you think you can do?
Well, you can do a lot through the. I'm trying to remember the name. There's a software product that basically allows you to design a product and create images of it and sort of do the cost estimates. I've got some students using it right now, and maybe the name of the product will pop into my head. But their product, by the way, is going to be, you know, with the sort of red drinking cups that are, you know, well known. They're in the student world, people think of them as beer pong cups. Yes, the solo cups. Well, they're because of another activity that students are into that I'm not allowed to know about. They're producing red cup-like shot glasses, and so they've used this prototyping software to create very elegant pictures that can be handed to a model shop, and they can sort of make one from that real easily. And so sometimes, you know, just good visualization of what you're going to do can do the job. You know, particularly if it requires, as in their case, it requires a lot of investment and actually to start making anything. So you know, make some good pictures. Show pictures or write descriptions of people using it. You know, so the question is, does the investor doubt that it can be built? You know, if that's the question, then you got to approach it differently than if the investor is just curious what it's going to look like, because you can give him a picture of it. Has that helped?
Yeah.
Good. Yes.
The obvious business plan is geared towards investors.
Well, the customer is the subject of your business plan. Anything that you will write about the customers and what they want would be something probably customers would be pretty interesting. They'd see themselves in it. So I think you're writing the story about the customer. They're the subject of it, and you're trying to. Customers already know themselves. You're trying to convince other people that you understand the customer.
Should customers review the business plan?
Why not? Why not? It's not a secret document. But that's a separate subject. We have our attorney here on this one. One of the things that investors try to do, I'll get to you in a sec, but one of the things that investors often, that entrepreneurs are often doing, they'll come to me and say, we'd like your opinion about the business plan. And one of the questions that's been coming up more often is, one, will I sign an NDA? And the answer is no. Sort of in a limited way. But they say, well, we've got this NDA, we want to present it to the investors. They're never going to sign it. Okay, and except in very, very special situations, not for the business plan. They may for the technical details of what you do, and then perhaps they should. But it's the whole idea that you're going to protect an idea. I think that who was it? Dave Parker was talking about it this morning about you should share your idea. You should bring more people into discussing your idea, because they will help you enrich it. When you got to talk to your customers like that. Well, there's a school of thought that says, well, I don't want anybody to know about my idea because they'll steal it from me. Well, and assuming that there's no patent involved. So just the idea, the concept itself, one, you can't protect it. Secondly, assuming that you've managed to keep it a secret and now you're first to market, in this day and age, usually any large company that was interested in it that you're trying to keep the secret from will reverse engineer the thing in the first 2 hours after it hits the market. And they'll put $12 million into creating a substitute, and so your lead that you thought was going to be 2 years is actually going to be 3 months. And so you might as well have floated the idea to begin with and let them go out and do it before they put you out of business, because then you're not broke. Yes, sir.
So you actually said that the founder should not be in love with his product.
I did not say that. I'm saying that the founder should not let their love for the product blind them to the realities of the world. Okay. I didn't say that either, but that's what I meant.
I think at one point you said that you rarely meet a founder who's in love with his product the second time. And I remember you said...
No, I think you misheard me. The founders are always in love with their product, and they need to be in love with their product. But that has nothing to do with whether or not it's a good idea from a customer point of view. That's sort of, so draw the distinction. What you want is to go talk to the customers, have the customers describe the fact that they want it to be square instead of round and blue instead of red, and that they haven't now destroyed your concept so much so you stay in love with it. That's the best of all worlds.
So,
yeah, Tom.
In terms of the format of the business plan, I've seen PowerPoint slides, executive summaries, 12-page plans, 100-page plans. Is there some guidance on what do you really need to get an investor to buy?
The less, the better. The less, the better. Try to get your story. Remember, this is a short story about customers, right? They don't need all the details of how you're going to make it and so on in the business plan itself. They want to know that you know it. So the business plan, this first version that you're handing to people, has got the story about customers and an indication that you know how you're going to be successful in the business in sort of a broad way. You want to get them to read it and like it. Once they read it and like it, they will start to ask you questions about it. And now you take this 10-page business plan and you move it aside and reveal that behind it is 100 pages of appendices with all the details they could possibly want. So, by the way, to get this short-form business plan, if you've been thorough, there's a lot of stuff. You've got a lot of data. My own market research could be, 20 pages of stuff. You're not going to put that in the plan because it'll put people to sleep. You'll extract from it that which is important. The other thing I didn't say about the business plan, but it's important, is it's a sales document. You're trying to sell somebody on the fact that you have something worth their investing in. And so you want to keep that in mind, and you don't have to give them all the details. You know, if there's something that's going to make the thing into a disaster and you know it ahead of time, you know, somehow you can't really go ahead. But, you know, sometimes you'll find investors that are willing to take those risks. You just have to let them know that the risk is there. So, you know, you're trying to certainly put your best foot forward in a business plan without hiding the truth, without disguising it in any way. But remember, a lot of it's guesswork. And, you know, you simply say, my best guess is, you know, in words that don't make it sound like that's what you're exactly saying. But, you know, the investors you're going to be talking to, angel investors and certainly venture capitalists, they kind of know these code words. So the code word never to use, never put the word conservative in your business plan, unless it's a political document. And then be careful who you're giving it to. Now, people say these are conservative forecasts. Nonsense. And what's a conservative forecast? And they say, well, what we really think is we're going to sell 100 of them a week, but we've only predicted we're going to sell 5 because we want to be conservative. Well, if you tell me you're going to sell 5, I think you're going to sell 5. And I'm going to make my decisions that way. So anytime anybody sees the word conservative related to particularly sales forecasts, they know that you're lying. Don't use the word. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever have a showcase of the best business plans you've read across?
Actually, on the website are some samples of business plans that I thought were good. It doesn't necessarily mean, by the way, that the businesses were the best businesses, but the plans were sort of thorough in terms of getting the point across. By the way, this is just an aside, but one of them that's on there, I believe, is what I call a negative business plan. The negative business plans are the hardest ones to write. Because you have to put all the work into writing the business plan, and then you go, you know, run the numbers and everything, and either something's changed in the world, or you finally got around to doing the calculations, and you realize, man, this is a bad business. I really shouldn't do this. Well, you know, you've just saved yourself 2 or 3 years of your life. You invested 6 months in the plan, but you've saved yourself years of anguish and a lot of cash. You know, because if you go out and try to take a plan that is in effect what I call a negative business plan, it's a business plan that describes a business that is not likely to succeed, you'll spend a lot of time trying to sell that to investors, and you'll waste even more time. When you finally run the numbers and it shows that you're not going to make money. Well, look, it's your money, right? You know, if you're the first investor. So, I mean, I had this experience. That's where the idea of sort of calling it that came out when I was working in the seaweed business up in Maine. And the CEO of the company gave me an assignment. First, they sent me to the Harvard Business School to get smarter. And then when I came back, I sort of had a new job in sort of new business development. The first thing that happened was the CEO of the company came to me and said, John, here's a business I've been talking to the board for about 4 or 5 months, getting them set up to invest $5 or $6 million in this new venture. Would you write the business plan for me to present to them? Well, okay, sure. You know, he's the boss. They just invested in me. So, you know, I started collecting all the information that was necessary. Well, they understood the markets. They understood the customers. There were a lot of pieces they were right. Well, so we were in the business of making stuff that we extracted from seaweed. The raw material for this particular new product, these are vegetable gums. One was carrageen and the new one was called guar gum. Guar gum comes from bushes, the seeds of bushes that grow in the desert in Texas. And you know, there are companies that were in the guar gum business and doing just fine, and we were proposing that we were going to enter it. And once I discovered that, and then I sort of looked at the landscape of how we're going to do it, I realized that there is no way on earth we're ever going to be able to get a supply of guar gum, you know, our own native supply. We could plant the bushes, we could buy the real estate, but, you know, then you're going to grow them for so many years and so on. And so in my mind, at least, this sort of took the time frame of the investment and completely moved it way out, and maybe made it virtually impossible. And so I went back and I said, look, here's the story. It's a great business to go into, but the producing of guar gum is nuts. We can't do it. We will fail at it. And so I suggest that you not do it. Well, I got to tell you, it takes, the idea of a negative business plan is one in which you have to do all the work for the business plan, but the conclusions are the conclusions. You take the data, you calculate everything, and it comes out negative. Sometimes it happens. That's why you're doing the plan, to find that out. It takes more information and more detail to convince somebody not to do something than it does to get them to do it. It's kind of human nature at work. But, the plan is a sound plan. You just look at the financials and they just don't look so happy. Or they look fine to you, but they don't look fine to the investor. So it'll turn out to be a negative business plan. It'll just take you longer to realize that you've written one.
That's another example of the founder not being too in love with their own idea.
Sure. Yeah, exactly right. It's a good description of it, too.
So in terms of success, I mean, if you're looking for a first-round investment and it's not successful if you don't... Oh, okay. So it would not be a successful business plan if it did not give a return of 5 times on the investment in a reasonable period or something like that.
Well, I mean, there is a number. The venture capitalists have this very high hurdle that say they've got to get 5 or 10 times their money potential out of your plan. And the reason that they've evolved to that point is that they have this portfolio approach. So the VCs they've got a lot of money they've got to invest. They're going to invest in 10 companies. They're going to be perfectly happy to get one of them that grows 10x because they know a whole bunch of the others are going to go to 0. So that's artificial on their point. But if you're going to open a deli, you write a business plan for the deli, you don't need 10 times your money.
But if part of your plan is to get capital, you need to get a 5 times return on the capital.
It depends on who's providing the capital. Okay, and this has to do. Remember, in a way, the investors are a type of customer. So your business plan is the product that you're trying to sell to them. And some investors, so I'm a member of the Keiretsu Forum, which is a big angel investor network, and have several chapters in the Northwest. And there are people coming to them, particularly in the last several years, that basically have cash flow generating businesses, distressed real estate funds and things like that, where they're going to buy and they're going to sell and they're going to produce a 15 or 20% return for several years. Well, that's pretty good. It doesn't have, and the other thing about them is that it's not a 1 out of 10 thing. That business is going to succeed 8 out of 10 times. So 8 times 20% is, in the same ballpark as 1 chance out of 10 with 5x. Anything else? Good. Well, thank you. Thanks for the questions, and I hope it was helpful.